Hello and welcome to Take Me Home, the podcast offering a social democratic alternative for the politically homeless. My name is Sebastian Moore.
And I'm hilary.salt.
And we are here today in a very wet Manchester day. The light is grey, but our spirits are not grey.
No, we're very upbeat.
We're fully underway in our council election campaigns. We've done a lot of letter delivery, leafleting. We're going to soon be doing some door knocking.
That's right. Street stall on Saturday.
Exciting stuff.
It is great. It's really good.
And today we're doing a news episode, which means Hilary and I will both bring a news item that we thought was interesting this week for us to discuss.
Correct.
Your news item is?
I want to talk about the question posed in the Sunday Times of is 1970s trade union power making a comeback?
Very interesting. And I'm going to talk about the denial of Kanye West's visa to the UK because he was supposed to be performing at Wireless Festival.
Okay.
But I suggest we do yours first.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. Shall I give you a bit of a flavour of what the article said first and then maybe give you an idea of what my response is?
Sounds good. And you can test me on some trade union initials if you like.
Okay,
you know.
yeah.
I've done a couple of quizzes recently.
I am trying to make sure that you know what all the initials stand for, aren't I? Right, okay. Well, let me try one on you. NUM.
NUM?
Yeah.
National Union of Miners.
Very close. Mine workers.
Mine workers.
Mine workers, yeah.
Okay.
The reason I asked you that one is that the funniest thing about this article in the Sunday Times was that there was a picture underneath of striking miners, obviously on some kind of demonstration. So, you know, they've all got their arms up in the air, looking really masculine and powerful. And it says underneath, there's a little caption underneath, striking mine workers with Arthur Scargill, brackets, with megaphone, close brackets. As though you wouldn't know who Arthur Scargill was. And I just thought that was really amazing to think that people would not know who he was. Would you know who he was?
I mean, I know of him. I know his name and the sort of battles, you know.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be able to recognise him.
Oh, gosh. Well, I actually did laugh out loud when I saw that they'd captioned it as if people wouldn't know who he was. So perhaps that's just a sign of how immersed I am still in it in 1984 politics. Anyway, so what this article is about is if you look around, things can, at first glance, look very much like the 1970s. So rocketing price of oil, tick. Inflation, a real problem for people, tick. And the article is trying to make the case that the other thing that perhaps we're going to see a comeback of is lots of trade union disputes and strikes. It does have a little graph of the number of days lost through strike action, which is ticking up a little bit, but it's kind of 2 million days a year compared to 25 million as it used to be. So, I mean, and my broad idea is that this article is a bit misguided, really, and I don't think that there's any great indication that there's going to be a return of trade union power. Perhaps just to talk a bit about trade unions, because as you know, I did a speech on this at one of our local groups, and so did have a few numbers to hand that I thought it might be good to share with people. So there's about 6.4 million workers in trade unions now, which is, you know, a massive fall from where we used to be. Slightly more women than men, 3.7 million women, 2.7 million men. And the overall level of people in trade unions, I think something like 40%, but that hides, I think, the fact that it's about 50% in the public sector and only about 12% in the private sector. So the really big areas where we have trade union members are really the public services, in particular education, health, transport. You might say that's not all public sector these days, but it's kind of semi-public, public service area. And I think about 40% of people are covered by what we call in the trade CBAs, collective bargaining agreements. That's where your pay and terms and conditions are set by a central agreement rather than you negotiating them separately for yourself. So none of that to me screams out, a return of mass trade union membership. The other thing that this article points to is the Employment Rights Act. Now, the Employment Rights Act, I think, was passed sometime last year, but the different elements of it are coming in at different times. One of the things that changes this month is a national minimum wage, which is nearly £13 an hour now. And new rights for workers like sickness benefit from day one. Now, you might say, that's something that is a real benefit to workers. I'm actually not that sure it is, because I think it will be a worry for employers who may be less willing to take people on if they think that that's a risk to their business. Certainly, I know that when I was an employer, you might be willing to take a chance on somebody who's perhaps had some sickness in the past, because you think, well, you at least have a period where you're trying them out and you're not required to immediately pay them sick pay. But now you are. I think you'll be less likely, in particular, to take a chance on people who have had some sickness in the past. So I'm not sure it's a great help.
How would you know if they'd had sickness in the past? Did they have to divulge that?
You would take a reference from their previous employer, and one of the things the previous employer will generally tell you is how much sick leave they've taken.
And do they have to tell the new employer?
They don't. No, employers don't have to give a reference. Lots of employers actually don't give a reference at all these days. Getting a reference from a previous employer now is generally, it's a very, very short report that they give you. So they will say, I employed this person from this time to this time. This is a record of a sickness absence. They didn't leave for any reason associated with fraud or yeah. Well, they wouldn't mention poor performance, because often people will have left through poor performance, and that won't be covered in their reference.
Surely they'd have to say if they were fired.
No.
Oh, okay. So just on this argument of the Employment Rights Act, and similarly to me, it feels quite similar to the Renters' Rights Bill, in that on the face of it, a lot of people will be feeling positive because they think, okay, that's more rights for people renting, it's more rights for employees.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side, people will say, yeah, but landlords are going to be less likely to want to rent out places now, and they'll want much more assured thing because they know that they can't evict, through no-fault evictions. And it's the same with, in the employers' side on in occupation, is that they can't, they have to give sick pay from day one, etc. Now, is there, some people might sort of say, fine, I can understand your argument there, but surely everybody deserves sick pay from day one, and everybody deserves assured tenancy. In a similar way to the minimum wage, everyone deserves a decent wage, even if people are aware of the fact that it might discourage certain employers from hiring people.
I think it's a particular issue, I would say, for smaller employers. So, I remember first starting a business, and when you're really trying to make ends meet, and if anybody who started a business will know that you don't pay yourself for a good few years, because you just don't have enough money to spare, and when you're having to spend some of that money paying sick pay to somebody who's not actually producing the work, where does that money come from? And I think that is a real barrier to people. Perhaps not a barrier to people setting up businesses, but certainly a barrier to people taking on new people. Now, you say everybody should be entitled to sick pay from day one. Possibly, but if you're going to make the employer responsible for paying that, you have to accept that is something that will stop businesses expanding. Now, you could say everybody's entitled to sick pay from day one, but it's the state that pays it. That would be a way that would mean, it's less of an issue for individual employers. But then who's policing that? And you get to the same situation that we're getting to now with PIP payments, where who's the gatekeeper to that, and that seems to me quite problematic as well. So I do think it's not unreasonable to expect somebody who's started a job to spend their first 3 months, 6 months working really, really hard and not taking a day off sick. And I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to ask of people.
Yeah, and I suppose if you're trying to envisage a job market which is adequate for your country, you'd be hoping that wages were good enough that people weren't living hand to mouth and weren't suddenly destitute if they had to go off sick for a week.
Good point.
We can probably aspire to more of that.
Absolutely. Yes, you're right. That's a really good point. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So getting back to the Employment Rights Act.
Yes.
So one of the things I would say about it is that it's giving, some of the elements of it are giving individuals more rights.
I thought you were going to use a bit of really young slang then. It's giving, do you know this?
No.
It's giving, and they'll come up with an adjective. It will be like, that's the slang. It's giving.
Oh,
have you never heard that?
What does it mean?
It's like it has a certain mood, I think. Now I'm going to be, people are going to be laughing at the Gen Z listeners will be laughing at me.
Right, okay.
But they'll say like, it's giving happiness, or it's giving joy.
Okay.
To mean like it has a certain atmosphere of that.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I've never heard that.
I wasn't going to say that.
You're more down with the kids than I am, I think. Sorry, it's giving something. I'm now completely blown us off course.
You have blown us off
giving?
Completely off course. It's giving individuals more rights. So I think some of the perception that it's giving unions more rights is actually wrong. It's not giving unions more rights, it's giving individuals more rights. And in some ways, the more individuals have rights, the less power that gives to trade unions.
And are the unions generally in favour of this bill?
Yes.
This act? It's an act.
Yes,
now,
it's an act, yeah. Yeah, they are in favour of it. And I think part of the reason is that I think many trade unions have now kind of almost given up on the idea of collective action, and what they want is more individual rights and a kind of legalistic approach to defending workers rather than one that depends on industrial strength. And I think that's not a good thing. I would rather unions concentrated on organising collectively than almost pleading for additional benefits or rights or privileges for workers. I think the thing that really has made a difference, if you look historically, has been when trade unions have collectively fought to improve things like pay and conditions, health and safety, all those kind of things.
This is something that wasn't so clear to me then when you gave that talk recently. You started getting me to think about this difference between, and this is partly due to my age because I've grown up in a much more individualistic society, and I hadn't considered this idea that trade unions have moved from this area of sort of collectivism to individualism, and they've had to respond to the individualism of our current society. So I think what you're saying is that in the past there'd be a collective agreement on something where all of the workers would come together and they would get a collective solution.
Correct.
Right? Whereas now the unions have sort of accepted defeat on certain things and said, okay, well, we can fight for more individual rights, like sick pay from day one.
Yeah, and I think, if you wanted to say when did this happen, the thing that always sticks in my mind, I don't know if you'll know about this, is in 1988 at the Trade Union Congress, Trade Union Congress, Jacques Delors attended. Do you know about this?
No, go on.
And the TUC delegates sang in French Frère Jacques to him.
Right.
Because in the trade union, we call people brother.
Yeah.
So Brother Jacques, that.
Yeah.
And to me, that was a kind of, it was almost the moment where you saw really clearly that the trade unions were kind of saying, let's go down the European route of seeking legal rights granted through social contract legislation rather than winning rights in a kind of industrial bargaining negotiation. And in some ways you can't blame them. If you look back to what had happened there, the miners had been defeated in 1984. The trade unions were effectively being power was being taken away from them. So the Thatcher legislation was coming in. They were really struggling. And so this alternative way of doing things, which looked very new and continental and sophisticated, I think was very attractive. But I think it has been a bit of a fool's errand. And I think at the end of the day, Thatcher destroyed trade unions by destroying industry. And, you look at those swathes of, the old Red Wall areas where all that industry has gone. We talked the other week, didn't we, about Denby pottery going. So we're continuing to see the deindustrialisation of huge swathes of the country. And, deindustrialisation does take away the power where trade union power lay. And I think if you want to rebuild the trade union movement, if you want to rebuild trade union power, you rebuild industry. You don't do it by looking for sick pay from day one.
I suppose because you're importing things from elsewhere, you have no concern of those conditions for those workers. And if they were, if those workers were to demand better conditions, you could be importing things from a different country.
I mean, that's an interesting point. In the past, there has been a real history of internationalism in the trade union movement. You might remember that Lancashire cotton workers refused to work with cotton that was imported after it had been, it had been picked by slaves. So I think that idea of having international solidarity with other workers is something that's really gone. And again, that's something that I think would be great to make a comeback. If people were saying, we're not going to accept the importation of cheap goods that has been made with slave labour, that would be great. But you don't see it happening, do you?
It's an amazing story, that, and it's sort of lost some of its awe for me because Andy Burnham mentions it every single time I go to see him speak.
Okay,
and he knows that he's mentioning it a lot as well, because as he goes to say it, he says, "Oh, some of my team will be rolling their eyes at the back there." I was given a guided tour yesterday to some friends that were visiting, and I was showing them the Abraham Lincoln statue.
Yeah.
Manchester City Centre, just off Albert Square, which has a lovely plaque as a message from Abraham Lincoln to the workers of Manchester that refused to handle slave bit cotton.
Lancashire, not Manchester.
Sorry?
Workers of Lancashire.
Which Manchester was in?
Yes, yeah. But more broadly, not just Manchester.
Very good. Two things. One is when you're talking about Thatcher and the reason that she was able to defeat the miners' strikes and so on. Are you sort of saying is the right analogy to say you've got a pest problem in your house and you put all of this very highly sort of technological powder and traps and all these things down, and then you burn the house down and you say, "Oh look, the traps worked." Is it something like that?
Yeah, I think that's not a bad analogy. Yes, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I'm not sure about comparing workers to vermin, but
I wasn't. You're always trying to get me into trouble. The second thing then, and this is more broad look at the whole trade union question, because you come out with some really interesting points and things that I'd never heard before. But then somebody listening to this might be thinking, okay, come on, what does Hilary think? Like, which side is Hilary on here?
yeah, yeah.
And they might think, okay, so there's in our sort of, and certainly for me, my very amateur understanding of that time before I was alive, you've got those battles between Scargill and Thatcher, and it sounds like you're coming down on the side of the trade unions, and you've said that some of the Thatcher legislation was quite a problem, and that it's
Still is.
Yeah, it still is making things bad. So where do you stand on that? Like, what are you just trying to concoct a 1970s vision of Britain?
No. So I think that there was a time in the 1970s when the ability of the trade unions to really flex their industrial muscles was such that they became a bit too trigger happy to, walk out on strike. But I think every trade union now and then, I think, would still say that nobody wants to take their workers out on strike. You only do it when it's the only thing that you've got left. And so I think it's very easy to blame all the industrial disputes of the 1970s on the trade unions, and not to say that, well, actually, there was a failure amongst management of businesses and the state to negotiate in good faith with trade unions. It's like in a war, I can't have one side fighting and the other side not. Both sides have got to be fighting. And the whole analysis of the 1970s is that it was the trade union's fault. And, if you look at the miners' strike in particular, what the miners were striking for was to save their jobs and their communities. Now, what's so bad about that? So I think a lot of those strikes were absolutely on the right, on the right side. And if you look back and try to say, with what we know now, were those strikes the right thing to do? I think you would say, yes. It's the fact that the strikes weren't successful that's the problem, because the strikes weren't successful, all those coal fields were shut down. All those communities are still massively short on jobs. The kind of replacement jobs have been in the kind of heritage and retail industries, not proper jobs, not proper engineering jobs, not proper well-paid, good quality jobs where you're producing something. And actually, had the strikes been more successful in defending industry, perhaps would have been in a better position now. So I do think when people look back, they perhaps have absorbed this kind of Thatcher idea that everything about the trade unions was wrong and everything about business was right. And I really don't think that is the case. It sounds like Friday is on the side of Thatcher, do you think?
Friday is upset with you.
Perhaps just something to pick up, because it kind of leads into it from that discussion about the Employment Rights Act. So one of the changes is if a workforce wants to be recognised by their employer, at the moment they have to win a ballot where at least, I think it's 40% of the workforce have to agree to the introduction of a trade union. One of the changes is that you just have to get a majority of whoever votes under the new requirements. And, I think that's okay. I don't have a problem with that. There is a suggestion that the government, there's a clause in the legislation that would allow the government to reduce the number of people who have to want a trade union down from the current 10% before there can be a ballot as to whether you have one, down to 2%. I actually don't think even the trade unions would want that, because I think that opens it up to some of the people who might... Sometimes you get a group of people in an organisation who've got one particular grievance that's, concerning them. And sometimes those little cliques of workers can be quite problematic in a workplace. So I don't think they would reduce it to 2%. But I do think that one of the ways I would criticise the NUM of old and back in 1984 was that one of the things they didn't want to do, and the government wanted them to do, was to hold a ballot of all their members on the strike action. And the reason they didn't want to have a ballot was because they weren't confident they would win it. And my view would be that they should have said, yes, there has to be a ballot. We agree there should be a ballot. And we need to go out and win over all our workers as to why strike action is right. And it's because they didn't do that, they weren't prepared to have those really tough arguments, that you got different regions who didn't really engage with all the discussion and therefore kind of made decisions that were right for them as individuals. And I think that lack of confidence in your ability to win workers round is one of the reasons why people perhaps felt in the olden days, in the 1970s, that trade unions were forcing their view on workers rather than having those arguments. And I think there's a lot of that about today. We've talked about some of the areas where trade unions perhaps let their members down. I think we talked at one point about the Darlington nurses, where this is where nurses are being forced to change in front of men in women's only spaces, and their trade union has not defended those women. And again, I do think that's the case of the kind of leadership of a trade union having one idea and just imposing that idea without having that discussion with their members. So I think trade unions have to be a body that really lives and breathes democracy. And perhaps they never have quite lived up to that, but I think that's what you would want to hold them to. Okay, very good. Is that all my answer to the question, will there be a comeback of 1970s style trade union power, is no, there won't. Not for the time being, anyway. No. Okay, let's move on, shall we? Yes. So you want to talk about something I probably don't know very much about, and perhaps as far removed from trade unions as you could possibly get, which is Kanye West and the Wireless Festival. So you're when you pronounce that name, yeah. Kanye. Yeah, people say it all different ways, don't they? Yeah. What's West. Right? Kanye West. I think if I'm being very posh, I might say Kanye West. Okay. But you can say it however you like. Okay. Are you a fan of Kanye West? I couldn't name anything by Kanye West. Oh, my goodness me. Sorry. Oh, my goodness me. I'm a big fan. Okay. And I'm not just going to throw out of his music as a qualifier, because I don't think that you should need to say that. I think that's why we listen to musicians. It's because we like their music, and it's weird. This a cult of the celebrity. It's very odd. It's like Wagner, isn't it? Yeah. Do you know this right, and debate? People say, "Oh, just his music." Yeah. Are you allowed to like Wagner? Yeah. I think it's very odd, but anyway, let's get into it. So, I keep hitting that. It must be very disconcerting for people. Wireless Festival. Okay. Was supposed to be happening in Finsbury Park, and Kanye West was headlining. Okay. It started popping up in the news earlier this week, and because Kanye West in recent years has come out with some really crazy things, particularly quite. You'd say
some anti-Semitic remarks. And in
Okay.
today's day and age, you think, okay, what's he said? Is it really that bad? I mean, one of his recent tracks was called Heil Hitler. So it's not a grey area, you know.
Okay.
And he went. He suffers from bipolar disorder, and
Does he?
What?
Does he really? Or is that just an excuse?
I don't know.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
I'm not his doctor, but he's gone on various podcasts and he's had a lot of controversies over the years. Much more so recently. He was dropped, I think, from Adidas, which they produced his Yeezys, like trainers. I think he was dropped from them at one point. And a lot of people were putting pressure, but I'd say the media were putting pressure on Wireless Festival to drop him. Pepsi stepped back from sponsoring the event. And what happened in the end was that the Home Secretary denied him his visa. And this has happened a few times certainly in recent months and years. And the reason given was that his presence would not be conducive to the public good.
Oh, right, okay.
Now, I don't know where you stand on this, and it might be interesting. For me personally, I find it really odd because I think that there is a reasonable argument to be made that you should restrict people from coming into the country if you think that they're not going to be conducive to the public good. But I would say that is much more for political activism, you know, far right extremism or Islamic terrorism, things like this, like really extreme cases where they might be whipping up some not, you know, very unpleasant things. I think somebody that said certain things, I don't think it's the right thing to do at all. And I think it should be down to the individuals going to the festival as to whether they want to buy tickets and whether they want to listen to him.
Yes,
And
yeah.
I mean, I still listen to Kanye West. I like his music. I haven't listened to Heil Hitler. I probably should just for,
You should, I
for
think,
research purposes.
Yeah.
But yeah, what's your take on it?
I agree that it feels like a wrong use of a political power to deny somebody entry just because of what they've said. There's a bit of a history of rock stars, if you want to call them that, going a bit loopy around Hitler. So I don't know if you know, there's a period of David Bowie's history in his kind of thin white Duke era when he seemed to get very keen on Hitler. So he said Hitler was the first rock star. And I mean, he later excused it on the basis of drugs rather than bipolar disorder. I think that was what he said in those days. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, surely he's not, I don't know what Heil Hitler is about, but I'm guessing it's not about recruiting people to an army to kill Jews, is it?
It's got some. I've read some lyrics in it that aren't all that pleasant, but I think the thing you've got to question is, do you know what this person is actually saying? Because if it's art, right, it could be artistic expression, and artists are weird, right? They always have been, and they come out with some really weird stuff, and that's part of the reason why a lot of their stuff we massively appreciate, because it's saying something different about the world. You know, I heard someone say recently, art is for telling the truth when words won't suffice, which I thought was really good.
Yeah.
Somebody else that was recently denied a visa for not being conducive to the public good was someone called Eva Vladingerbroek. Have you heard of her?
No, I don't know her.
Dutch political commentator.
Okay.
Deemed far right. I mean, she's pretty, you know, on the edge of the right wing spectrum for sure. But it was another one. I think it was just a few months ago. I think often I've looked at a few of the cases that people that have been denied a visa for similar reasons, and often they are right wing voices and deemed, you know, far right, etc. I've not seen anybody. There might be some, but I've not seen anybody that were people that were espousing typically, you know, far left positions that were denied visas.
And is this by the current government? Or
yes.
by? Oh.
Yeah.
Not from the previous government.
Oh, even previous governments, I can't find
okay.
any examples of that. There have been ones like Mike Tyson was denied entry because of his criminal record. Chris Brown, rapper.
See,
Lil Wayne. You're not familiar with Lil Wayne? My goodness, shocking.
Sorry, I'm really not doing well on this specialist subject of yours today, am I?
But I do think, I mean, it's a bit of a cheap shot, but I would say it's it's funny how the government are able to enact a border when it comes to allowing celebrities in or not, but then they struggle when it comes to the channel. And I think, whilst I don't want to sound like a right-wing TV host, I do think it's a point that's worth making, because a lot of the time, and I get a bit annoyed about this, and I think it's a symptom of the fact that we are no longer able to act in that political arena and to have dialogue with people with differing opinions where it's constructive and we're sort of coming to some sort of higher agreement or understanding. But often what you hear is people will say, we don't have a border, right? Get a border, that's what we need. And I'm like, we've got a border. You might not like the way it's being run, but we do have a border, right? And this just goes to show the procedures that are in place when granting people visas, and the fact that the Home Secretary can just say, no, we don't want that person in.
Yes, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And, people might disagree with that. I disagree with it in this instance. But it's quite, in some ways it's reassuring. I think that politicians do have that power. And I think you and I both agree on the sovereignty of Parliament and the fact that it should be Parliament that decides these things. And I know the Home Secretary is it's an executive position, but it's kind of nice that those powers are vested there. Is that something that should be enacted? Do you think that's something that they should reserve the right to deny people entry?
Yeah, I think so. Yes, I think it is right. You should be able to say no.
And so who would you be using it for?
Oh gosh, right. That's a bit of a tricky question. Who would I say you should not allow them into the country?
It was a flowchart. I was ready for the next question if you fell into my trap.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, out and out terrorists, you would say no to, wouldn't you?
I'm going to get in trouble on this episode. I'm sure.
I mean, people who you actually thought were danger to public safety, you would say no to.
Yeah.
That doesn't feel to me contentious to say that. People whose, I suppose the question is, so you're saying that this is somebody who's an artist rather than a politician. If somebody was, I mean, that word Nazi is so overused these days, isn't it, that it's hard to think what I mean if I say it. But, if somebody was a real out-and-out Nazi, would you, who was a politician, would you say it's okay for them to come to the country?
Well, I think one of the distinctions, and this is really important, is I have a very, very different opinion when it comes to British citizens, because British citizens, which is actually quite hard to say, have a right to espouse any opinion they want and to act within the political structures of the country that they're residing in, of this country. Yeah. And so I'm much more stringent when it comes to that. I say, no, those rights need to be protected. When it comes to other people coming in from elsewhere, I think they've got... It's not a right for them to immediately be able to come in, right? We decide that as the political subjects of this country. We should be able to decide that. But I do think it needs to come back to the people again. And I don't think, something like this, lots of people have gone to buy tickets. Clearly a lot of people wanted to see him. Just because a vocal group don't want to see him, I don't think the answer in that conflict is to say, okay, well, we'll side with this group or we'll ban him from coming in. Sorry. To answer your question, if it's a foreign politician, I would say, well, they should be invited here, or that they are here at the in some ways the invitation of the British state. If they want to be in this country, because they are naturally, if they're here for business reasons and they're speaking to people, giving talks, then I do think it's the British state should decide that. I think so. I haven't really thought about that too much, but. And I think that goes for, it's not about, because we get really caught up in Nazis, and it's
We do,
like
yeah.
Hitler is the
I know, yeah.
It's almost like the ultimate Uno reverse card. Like as soon as you say Hitler, it's okay, well, you know, because he is the sort of the modern day devil, you know. But I'd say whoever it is, whatever their political opinions, you know, if Emmanuel Macron were to want to visit the UK, I think the British government should be able to say yes or no.
Yes, agreed.
Right?
Agreed.
But it's not something I would be, you know, I'm typically more on the side of freedom here. So it's typically not something I'd be enacting on an everyday basis.
Yeah.
Especially if people want to listen to Kanye West's music.
I'm going to ask a really stupid question now.
Yeah.
Is Kanye West American?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And
you don't know any of his songs?
No.
I was going to ask you for your favourite song, but I can't really do that.
No.
Jesus Walks? That's my favourite.
No.
All Falls Down? No.
No.
I mean, it's...
None of them. Sorry.
Yeah. I'm trying to think which one you'd be more likely to know. You'd know, like Stronger. You'd know a couple for sure if I played them.
Would I? Okay.
If it weren't copyrighted, I'd play some on the...
I'll go and do some homework.
Yeah, you should.
And let you know what I think.
Yeah.
I suspect I'm not going to be... Well, I won't be buying a wireless ticket now anyway, will I? But I suspect I wouldn't be looking for one anyway.
Yeah. And there's a last point then, and this is perhaps a slightly more contentious thing. A lot of this is getting cut, isn't it? I do think we are all blind to our own prejudices, and I think we are biased. And this is normal, but we just have to step back and look at it. When somebody says something about one group, or when it's a certain opinion that's just anti-Semitism seems so vile and so horrible to us, particularly with what's happened in the 20th century and before, that it can blinker us a little bit, and we go, whoa, that's crossed the line, that's unacceptable.
Yeah.
But I think if you have a principle about what people should be able to say or not, and whether they should be able to say those opinions in public, etc., that principle should hold, whether it's anti-Semitism or Islamophobia or any of the bigotries that are out there. And I do think this is one of those which gets, looking at the press coverage of this, typically right-wing media have been a lot more hostile to this than they would have been if it had been, somebody speaking out against Islam, for example.
Yes, yeah.
And I think that is because of the content of what Kanye West says. And so I don't think people hold true to what the principles they usually espouse,
Feels
and we
right.
should. I think.
We should. I agree. We should. Yeah. Yeah. Well, is that a wrap on Kanye West?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for trying to educate me to some extent on that topic. As I say, I will go away and do some homework.
Very good.
Hope you enjoyed that. Hope you knew a bit more about Kanye West than I did. And hope you enjoyed the episode. And we'll see you again next time.
Thanks for listening.